I switched the bottles. My hands didn't shake, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted to break free. 47 years as an aerospace engineer taught me precision, attention to detail, the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. And what I'd seen 3 nights ago, reflected in the darkened window of my own kitchen, was a pattern I'd hoped never to recognize in my own home. My nephew Marcus thought I was asleep, thought the sleeping pills he'd been gradually increasing in my evening tea had done their job. He thought a lot of things about me, actually. That I was old, forgetful, desperate for family after my wife Ellen passed 2 years ago. That I'd be so grateful for his company up here in my Colorado cabin that I wouldn't notice what he was really after. He was wrong about all of it. The bottle of blood pressure medication sat on the counter where I'd left it, exactly as planned. Next to it, an identical bottle. Same label, same everything, except the contents. I'd spent yesterday afternoon in town, talking to my old friend Carl Thompson, a pharmacist who'd worked with me on some aerospace medical equipment contracts back in the day. What I'd shown him, the pill I'd found hidden in Marcus's jacket pocket, carefully photographed and replaced, had made his face go white. "Richard," he'd said, his voice tight, "this is digoxin, but the dosage. This isn't a therapeutic dose. This is enough to cause a fatal arrhythmia in someone with my heart condition, especially if combined with my actual blood pressure medication." I'd finished his sentence. Carl had known me 30 years. He knew I didn't panic. I calculated. Now, standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, I carefully placed the switched bottle back in its spot. The real medication was locked in my gun safe, along with the evidence I'd been collecting. The bottle I left out contained nothing but carefully dosed calcium supplements, harmless, but similar enough in appearance that Marcus wouldn't notice if he checked. In the bottle where he'd hidden his supplies, thinking I'd never find it behind the loose board under his bed, I'd made a different substitution, something that would make him very sick, but not kill him. I'm not a murderer, unlike my nephew. The floorboards creaked overhead. Marcus was moving. I walked slowly back to my room, letting my slippers scuff the way they naturally did, affecting the slight shuffle I'd been exaggerating for weeks now. Playing the part, the sick old man, the lonely widower, the easy mark. 3 months ago, Marcus had shown up at my door. Ellen had been gone 6 months, and I was still figuring out how to live in the silence. My son, David Marcus's uncle by marriage, had called ahead. "Dad, Marcus is going through a rough patch. Lost his job, his girlfriend. He needs a place to clear his head. You've got all that room up there. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing someone was checking on you." I should have questioned it more. Should have wondered why David, who'd been distant since Ellen's funeral, was suddenly concerned. Should have noticed that Marcus's rough patch involved designer clothes, a new truck, and an expensive watch. But grief makes you soft, makes you want to believe in family, in connection, in the idea that someone actually cares whether you wake up in the morning. The first week was fine. Marcus was charming, helpful. He'd cook dinner, chop wood, tell stories that made me laugh for the first time in months. He asked about my work, seemed genuinely interested in the engineering projects I'd spent my life on. Asked about my finances too, but in that casual way that didn't raise flags. Must be nice, having that government pension. And Ellen's life insurance. "You're all set, right, Uncle Richard?" I'm not actually his uncle. Ellen's sister had married David's business partner, and Marcus was their nephew on the other side. But I'd known him since he was a kid. Knew his mother had died young. Knew his father was a drunk. I wanted to help. Wanted to be the family he'd never had. By week 3, I'd noticed small things. My pills looked different some mornings. The bottle cap wasn't quite screwed on the way I left it. Marcus asking detailed questions about my will, about whether I'd made arrangements, about who my beneficiaries were. I'd told him, in a moment of weakness and whiskey, that Ellen and I had never been able to have kids, that David was the closest thing I had to a son, even though we'd grown apart, that my estate, the cabin, the savings, the pension, would go to him when I was gone. What I hadn't told Marcus was that I'd changed my will 6 weeks ago. Something about his questions, his timing, had triggered those same instincts that had kept me alive through 47 years of working with systems that could kill you if you missed one calculation. I'd driven down to Denver without telling him, spent 3 days arranging things, setting up cameras, talking to lawyers, making preparations. The cameras had shown me everything. Marcus going through my papers, photographing my bank statements, making phone calls in his truck where he thought I couldn't hear. It'll look natural. Old man, heart condition, lives alone in the mountains. Who's gonna question it? Yeah, David's got power of attorney. We're splitting it. He doesn't even have to know what I did. Just has to sign the paperwork when it's over. David, my son was in on it. That was the knife that cut deepest. Not Marcus. He was a stranger, really. A man I'd tried to help, who'd turned out to be a predator. But David, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd stood beside me at Ellen's funeral and promised we'd stay close. He'd traded his father's life for money. I lay in bed now, listening to Marcus move around upstairs. My bedroom was on the main floor. Marcus had the loft, said he liked the view. Really, he liked being able to monitor my movements, to know when I was asleep, when I'd taken my medication. When I was vulnerable, my phone buzzed silently. A text from Detective Sarah Chen, Colorado State Police. She was Carl's niece, and when he'd told her what we suspected, she'd driven up immediately. Now she was in a rental house 3 miles down the mountain, watching the feed from my cameras, ready to move when I gave the signal. He's up, moving toward kitchen. You okay? I texted back. Proceeding as planned. The plan was simple. Let Marcus think it was working. The pills he'd been adding to my medication would start showing effects soon. He'd calculated based on a 3-week loading period. I should be getting confused, dizzy, having irregular heartbeats. Should be heading for that fatal cardiac event any day now. He'd act concerned, suggest I stay in bed, maybe that we not call for help right away when it happened. Just let it run its course. Natural causes. Instead, I'd been documenting everything. The real pills in the safe. The fake ones I was taking. The blood tests Carl had been running to show I had no digoxin in my system. The video of Marcus replacing pills in my bottle. The audio of his phone calls. The paper trail showing David's sudden interest in my estate. The power of attorney documents he'd prepared, but I hadn't signed. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed Marcus to act, to show intent. That's why I'd switched the bottles tonight. Why I'd left out the medication that was actually going to make him sick. Because Marcus had started taking my blood pressure pills 3 days ago. I'd noticed the count was off. At first I thought I'd miscounted. Then I realized he was testing them, making sure they weren't tampered with, making sure that when the time came, he wouldn't accidentally take a fatal dose himself. He was careful, methodical, professional, almost, but he hadn't counted on me being more careful. The pills he'd taken from my bottle over the past 3 days were real. Standard blood pressure medication. But the bottle I'd left out tonight, the one I knew he'd check before putting in the digoxin, that one contained something different. A carefully measured dose of ipecac and a mild sedative, enough to make him violently ill, enough to send him to the hospital, where blood tests would show what he'd been taking, and more importantly, what he'd been planning. Morning came slowly. I made coffee, shuffled to the kitchen, made a show of taking my medication from the bottle. Marcus came down 30 minutes later, looking tired. Good. He'd been up late last night, probably psyching himself up for what he thought was the final phase. Morning, Uncle Richard. You okay? You look pale. I let my hand shake as I set down my coffee. Just tired. Didn't sleep well. Concern flooded his face. The fake kind. The kind that made my skin crawl. Maybe you should stay in bed today. Rest. I can bring you lunch. Maybe you're right. I stood slowly, grabbed the counter for support. It wasn't entirely an act. I was 67, and rage makes you tired. I think I'll lie down. I watched from my bedroom door as Marcus waited until he thought I was settled. Watched through the crack as he went to my pill bottle. Opened it. Examined the contents. Watched him pull a small amber vial from his pocket. Watched him replace 3 pills with 3 from his vial. Careful, precise, murderous. Then I watched him take 2 pills from my bottle, the one he thought was safe, and swallow them with water. I waited. 20 minutes later, I heard the first sounds. Gagging, running footsteps, the bathroom door slamming. I gave it another 10 minutes, listening to him get sicker. Then I sent the text to Sarah. Now, I walked slowly to the bathroom door. Knocked. Marcus, you okay in there? The sounds inside were not okay. Marcus was learning what it felt like to be poisoned. Not enough to kill him. Not even enough to do permanent damage. But enough to scare him. Enough to make him think about what he'd been planning to do to me. I don't know what. Something I ate. Let me call for help. I pulled out my phone. No. I'll be fine. Just give me a minute. I really think we should call someone. You sound bad. The door opened. Marcus stood there, gray-faced, sweating. I said I'm fine. Just maybe food poisoning. I'll be okay. You sure? Because you know what's interesting? I held up my phone. I've been feeling a lot better lately. Clearer. Stronger. Know why? He stared at me, confusion mixing with the illness in his eyes. Because I haven't actually been taking those pills you've been doctoring. The ones in the bottle you just opened? Those aren't blood pressure medication anymore. And the ones you just took? Those weren't either. The color drained from his face. I don't. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the digoxin you've been replacing my medication with. The calls to David about splitting my estate. The fact that you've been slowly poisoning me for 3 weeks. Or trying to. I'm talking about attempted murder, Marcus. He moved fast, even sick, grabbed my arm, slammed me against the wall. You crazy old man. No one's going to believe that. You're confused. That's what happens to old people. They get paranoid. They imagine things. Like this? I held up my phone. On the screen, video of Marcus replacing pills. Or this? Another screen. Audio transcription of his calls with David. Or maybe this? Another. Paper trail of their plans. His grip loosened. You've been recording everything. For 6 weeks. The cameras are hidden in the smoke detectors, the thermostat. Even that ugly lamp Ellen's sister gave us that I could never get rid of. Turns out it's good for something after all. Delete it. His hand went to his pocket. I saw the knife before he pulled it out. Of course he had a knife. Delete all of it, or You'll what? Kill me now. In broad daylight. On camera. While you're already sick from the pills you thought were safe? That's not smart, Marcus. That's not the careful plan you had. Sirens cut through the mountain air. Marcus's head whipped toward the window. 2 Colorado State Police vehicles were pulling up the long driveway. Lights flashing. I called them 30 minutes ago. Right after you took those pills. They've been waiting for my signal. Detective Chen came through the door first, weapon drawn, 2 uniformed officers behind her. Marcus Sterling put down the knife and stepped away from Mr. Sterling. Now, what happened next happened fast. Marcus tried to run, made it 3 steps before he doubled over and vomited again. The officers had him on the ground in seconds. I watched them cuff him, read him his rights, help him to his feet. He looked at me once, and there was nothing in his eyes but rage and betrayal. You set me up. You're just a bitter old man who couldn't handle someone caring about him. Caring. I let the word sit there. Is that what you call it? You want to know what caring looks like, Marcus? Ellen cared. When she was dying, she spent her last clear-headed days making sure I'd be okay, making lists, teaching me to cook her recipes, recording voice messages for me to find later when I felt alone. That's caring. What you did? That's just greed with a friendly face. Detective Chen stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, we'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. But first, the EMTs should check you out. I'm fine. But Marcus needs to go to the hospital. The pills I gave him aren't dangerous. But he should be monitored. She smiled slightly. Clever. The ones he took? Ipecac, mild sedative, and some crushed ginger for realism. Carl helped me calculate the doses. Enough to make him very uncomfortable, but nothing that'll cause lasting harm. I'm not like him. They took Marcus away in an ambulance. Police escort attached. I stood on my porch and watched them disappear down the mountain road. Sarah stayed behind, helping me disconnect the cameras, bag the evidence, document everything. Your son, David, she said quietly. He's being picked up in Denver right now. We've got his phone records, the power of attorney documents, his bank statements showing deposits from Marcus. He's going to claim he didn't know what Marcus was planning. He knew. I said it flatly, factually. He gave Marcus my medical information, my routines, my vulnerabilities. He knew. How are you doing? With that part, I thought about it. About the boy I'd raised, who'd called me dad for 30 years, who'd turned out to be willing to trade my life for money. I'm angry, hurt, betrayed, but I'm alive, and that's more than they'd planned for me. The trial took 8 months. Marcus pleaded guilty to attempted murder, got 15 years. His lawyer tried to claim diminished capacity, emotional distress, that I'd entrapped him. None of it stuck. The evidence was too clear. The video of him replacing pills, the audio of him discussing my death, the digoxin found in his possession. The paper trail of his debts turned out he owed money to some very dangerous people, and my estate was going to be his way out. David fought harder, claimed he thought Marcus was just visiting me, helping out, that he'd had no idea about the poisoning. But his phone records showed otherwise. Meetings with Marcus, discussions about my assets, the power of attorney he'd drafted, timing it to take effect right around when I was supposed to have my natural cardiac event. He got 7 years as an accessory. Could have been more, but his lawyer was expensive and good. I didn't go to either sentencing. Sarah Chen went, called me after. Marcus showed no remorse. David cried, said he was sorry, said he loved you. Did he say why? Money. Just money. His business was failing. He was going to lose everything. He convinced himself it was okay because you were old, you'd had a good life, you'd want to help him. Except he never asked. Never gave me the chance to help legitimately. Just decided it was easier to kill me. People are terrible at asking for help. They're really good at justifying terrible things instead. After it was all over, I spent a lot of time thinking about that, about how David had been raised better, how I'd taught him about integrity, about honor, about family. Ellen had loved him like her own son. We'd given him everything we could. And somewhere along the way, he'd learned to see people, even us, as obstacles to what he wanted, as resources to exploit. I changed my will, finally signed it. The cabin goes to a program that helps at-risk youth. Kids like Marcus might have been, if someone had cared enough to intervene earlier. My savings go to various charities. The pension dies with me. David gets nothing. Marcus gets nothing. That's not revenge. That's just completion. I'm writing this 2 years later. I'm 69 now. Still healthy. Still clear-headed. Still angry sometimes. But mostly just tired. Tired of the violence people do to each other. Tired of the betrayals we justify. Tired of the way money makes us into things we never meant to be. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for Ellen, who taught me to pay attention. Grateful for Carl and Sarah, who helped me fight back. Grateful for the instincts that kept me alive when my own family wanted me dead. Grateful for every morning I wake up and see the mountains through my window, knowing I survived. Marcus will be out in about 13 years. If he behaves. He'll be 48. Still has time to build a different life. I hope he does. I hope prison teaches him what I apparently could, that other people aren't just obstacles or opportunities. That there are things more important than money. David gets out sooner. 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. I don't know if I'll ever talk to him again. Part of me wants to understand how we got here. Wants to hear him explain what happened to the boy who used to bring me drawings from school, who cried at Ellen's funeral, who I loved like my own son. But another part of me knows some betrayals are too deep. Some breaks don't heal. You can forgive, maybe, but you can't forget. You can't unknow that someone you loved was willing to watch you die for their convenience. People ask me sometimes how I knew, how I figured it out before it was too late. Was it the pills? The questions? The timing? And I tell them it wasn't any one thing. It was a pattern, a lifetime of training to see patterns, to notice when something doesn't add up, to trust your instincts even when your heart wants to believe something different. That's what saved me. Not cleverness, not paranoia, just the simple practice of paying attention, of checking my work, of not assuming that because something should be true, because family should be loyal, because people should be decent, that it actually is. Ellen used to say I was too suspicious, too careful, that not everyone was out to get me. She was right, mostly. Most people aren't out to get you. Most people are just trying to get by, same as everyone else. But some people are predators, and they're really good at looking like family, at saying the right things, at making you feel like you're being paranoid or bitter or difficult for not trusting them completely. The thing is, trust isn't paranoia's opposite. Verification is. Trust but verify isn't about suspicion. It's about survival. I switched the bottles because I'd verified the threat, because I'd done the math and run the calculations and seen the pattern. And when Marcus reached for what he thought was my medication, what he got instead was a reflection of his own intentions. That's not revenge. That's just engineering. You build systems that fail safe. You protect against single points of failure. You don't assume everything will work perfectly. You plan for what happens when it doesn't. My family was a point of failure, and I survived because I'd planned for it. I still live in the cabin, still watch the sunrise over the mountains, still make Ellen's recipes on Sundays, still miss her with an ache that hasn't faded. But I'm alive to miss her. So, alive to remember her. Alive to tell this story. And that's something Marcus and David didn't plan for. They planned for a funeral, for an obituary, for a quiet disposal of the old man who stood between them and what they wanted. What they got instead was this: a man who refused to be a victim, who trusted his instincts, who verified before he trusted, who switched the bottles and lived to tell about it. The mountains are still beautiful. The cabin is still home. And I'm still here, writing this, hoping someone reads it and learns what I learned. That attention is survival. That verification is love. That sometimes the most important calculation you'll ever make is knowing when someone's math doesn't add up. I switched the bottles. And I'm still alive. That's the only revenge I needed.